Welcome back to the Office Marketing Podcast with Mike Swigert, the podcast all about sales tips, mindset, and value bombs. 5 questions to help make your day more productive and learn a thing or two. Here is your host, best-selling author, Mike Swigert.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to the Office Marketing Podcast. I've got a very timely, very timely guest today. It's Jeremy Kovacs. He comes from Kamco Supply Corporation. They are one of the largest commercial and residential suppliers of building materials in the country, primarily in the Northeast. But I'll tell you what, I'm really fascinated to have Jeremy on. Not only are we going to talk about, him and his journey, but we're going to kind of find out, what's going on in the world of building supply today. So, Jeremy, thanks for taking time out of your day to share your insights.
Thank you, Mike.
Well, hey, why don't you go ahead and start out? Tell us a little bit something about you, and then let us know when 2x4s are going to come back to earth when it comes to their actual costs. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, no, I mean, everyone's asking that question. I mean, I get that question multiple times a day. It's 2x4s, it's plywood, it's insulation. But basically, like you said, we're really large, mainly in the Northeast. My company, where we're based out of, I'm based out of Brooklyn, New York. I cover all of Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island. So we ship to all 5 boroughs, including upwards to Westchester. We also have a branch in New Jersey. So, population wise alone, that controls a large sector of building. And, we're mainly focused on commercial, but we do residential as well, because obviously everything's built with the same type of stuff. You can't build a residential high rise in New York without using steel studs. Obviously there's commercial on the bottom floors, so they kind of mix. Most of them are mixed units. So we deal with a lot of major projects, especially like Hudson Yards. It's still being developed. Downtown Brooklyn, which they're just building on top of each other at this point. So it's interesting seeing a lot of things turn, especially with, Amazon trying to get into Long Island City, seeing the reaction from that.
Jeremy, we're gonna stay not political. No mention of AOC when it comes to Amazon. We're very right down the middle on this show. That's what we do. Hey, I will tell you, I was in New York City. My oldest daughter's real big fan of musical theater, so we'd go up to the city a lot. Mm-hmm. And we walked across the Brooklyn Bridge, and I remember the entire time I'm walking across the bridge with my family, thinking, oh my gosh, Brooklyn is quite a metropolis. Like you're
counting the cranes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. There must've been 20 cranes, Jeremy. All right. So keep on going. Tell us more about you too, Jeremy.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, we had a chance to discuss before the podcast, but, I come from just middle, kind of middle of the road. My mom was a bartender. My dad was a contractor. And, he owned his own contracting business, and he went on my parents divorced at a very young age. So I lived with my mom primarily. She was a bartender. Then she worked for a moving company for a majority of the years. And my dad had his own contracting business, and then moved into sales for a really large ceiling manufacturer, which did very close business with Kamco. And then sort of right before the recession, they hired him to come on board and run a division within Kamco. So he went in, ran that division. They ended up closing that division and then making him in charge of Brooklyn, mainly Brooklyn operations and everything like that. And so then I was in high school. I wasn't really the best scholar. I didn't really follow all the rules. I kind of just, did what I wanted. And I got into a little bit of trouble doing that. So when I was about 15 years old, I got in a little bit too much trouble. So they were like, my dad goes, you're going to come work in the warehouse. And which means, in Brooklyn, we have a really large establishment there. Our warehouse, he actually painted the roof red, so you can actually see it from space. It's so big. It's like a football field and a half long.
Nice.
So that meant, summer filled with, taking cement bags over my shoulder, loading them onto pallets, helping out customers, doing this and that. And, but, I made a pretty good, I earned a pretty good amount during that summer. And I was just like, it's a good workout. It's nice working outside. and making a little bit of money. I was making more than any of my friends were making.
But by the way, Jeremy, this is what I one, I'm a huge fan of yours. We click immediately, but you had two choices at 15. You could have either gone down the life of crime, which in New York City and Hoboken, New Jersey, you have plenty of options, or your dad could say, "Hey, cut the crap and haul cement bags for a summer," which I like your dad too. Like what a great gift he gave you that summer.
Yeah, if you know my dad, though, it's like there was no option. He was like, "You're gonna come." He goes, "You're gonna come. You're gonna work. You're gonna make a pretty." And honestly, I got in so much trouble that my mom said no more and shipped me off to live with him. And I was living in Edison at the time, and then I lived in Summit with him. So I went to Summit High School. I had to transfer high schools. Every single summer I'd wake up 4 a.m. because he never sleeps. He'd wake up and then he'd wake me up at 4 a.m., drag me to Brooklyn. And I had my permit at the time. So it was like, I'd work all day in the warehouse, sweat my ass off. And then I'd have to drive him home. So it was like, not only was I, working all day in the warehouse, and I'd have to also chauffeur him home. So it was like, sort of a learning experience. But yeah, no, it definitely benefited me greatly because it gave me a little bit of structure. I wasn't out running around with my friends in the summer doing whatever, so it definitely offered me a lot of insight into, what earning money is. I'd get my paycheck at the end of the week and he'd be like, you made this much money, let's keep this, put it in a savings account. And I was like, okay, whatever, I'll have a savings account. And then, when I'd go back to school during the year, I'd have a little bit of money to spend. So it was, learning experience. It's definitely a learning experience.
That's great. So how did you end up? You had a little stop off in college, right?
Mm-hmm.
Spent a little time in Stockton,
Uh-huh.
and then you're looking for a job. So
yeah, well, I actually, even in Stockton, I still would come home. Like I didn't have a summer from that point on. Like when I turned 16, I didn't have a summer until I haven't had a summer, without working. So I basically, even in college, come home and still work all summer. And after a certain time, in college, I was like, okay, I'm in college now, I'm over 18. They could put me on the books, they're not paying me under the counter. So it's like, I want to do something that's legitimate. So with so much inventory, we have cycle inventory counters that, constantly, checking the turnover rate and checking in inventory, seeing how much we have, checking the discrepancies, all that stuff. And honestly, it's monotonous. You're going around counting pieces of lumber and pieces of steel and pieces of sheetrock. It's a lot. So
I'm sure, but here's the thing is, I find this terribly fascinating. And I'm sure some people listening are going, this sounds great. And the other half are going, yeah. Can you get to the point where you tell me when 2x4s are getting cheap again?
The problem is like, you would count it like, yeah, counting's not hard.
Right.
But it's like, you'd go and check it. And as you were walking in, a trailer full of stuff came in and they checked it. So your counts would be off by like 10,000. They're like, dude, what the hell? I'd be like, well, all right, something had to have happened. I had to go back out and check it. And then by the time I'm done with that, it's like 3:00. And now they're starting to pull stuff for deliveries. And I'm like, all right, now it's just, but yeah. And so after a while of that, it's just got so, I was like, I want to do something worth, my brain power. And, they were like, why don't you try sales? And so I went and sat down at the desk and I learned our computer system and I started to pick up the phone and get yelled at by contractors. Like, I need this, I need that. And, really sort of started taking a liking to,
Jeremy, your parents literally are like the perfect combo to prepare you for the construction world.
Yeah.
Mom, bartender and moving experience, dad, contractor.
Yeah.
You learned how to negotiate. You watched them kind of negotiate how to deal with you through high school. This is kind of cool. Like you literally have the DNA to be exactly where you are right now, brother. Keep going.
Yeah, no, that's what I was told. It was, so I was in sales for a while. And so then basically all throughout college, I did sales. So I would be typing tickets, typing quotes. And then, after the first summer, I was typing as much, if not more than most of my colleagues. And I was only 19 years old. So it was like, I had fast fingers. I was able to talk on the phone, get them off the phone really quickly, get the orders in, get the deliveries out efficiently. And, it really helped them out because we had one guy go out with a knee surgery, another guy go out with a hernia surgery. So it was like they needed the help. And so when I came in there and I kind of filled that hole, they were like really appreciative of what I did, even though I was, doing it for probably a lot less than what other people were doing it for, because I was only doing it for a summer
Right.
and like, my winter break when I'd come back. But yeah, no, I filled a void that they desperately needed, and it was pretty good deal that we had worked out.
Yeah. So
But,
now you're in outside sales. So how'd you get into
uh,
outside?
so after college, I started as an inside salesperson, and I did that for about a year and a half or so. And again, it started to become a little monotonous. It's like, I'm just sitting there typing tickets. I'm talking to guys who don't really know what they need. It's like whenever I had the chance to talk to, in construction, there's not a lot of presidents, there's principals, there's directors. And so when you would talk to people like that, or senior manager in charge of purchasing, something like that, they have a lot of weird titles. There's no real, like, structure wise with those. But when I got a chance to talk to people like that, it was like, oh, thank God. It's like somebody knows what they need. And it's like, a very refreshing conversation. It's easy to pitch because, as an inside salesperson, I didn't get really too many opportunities to pitch because it was basically, you're just taking orders. It's like, take my order and shut up. And I didn't really like it. And so, when I got a chance, and they actually needed an outside salesperson in the territory because the other one got promoted, and they didn't really have too many people covering Queens. And so they said, all right, a couple days a week, we'll send you out, see how you do. And I loved it, kind of going out there, making my own schedule, talking to people that I wanted to talk to, as opposed to just dealing with people who needed one thing and nothing else. It was a challenge, and it used more brain power
Yeah.
than, than I was used to. And it was really nice. It was refreshing. And then, they brought me on full time now about a year and a few months ago. So
What a fascinating time to come into, Jeremy. Like, it's a crazy time.
I got promoted. I literally, this is the time frame. I got promoted. I went to Montana on vacation with my two friends. I was at the Javits Center for a New York Village show, 20,000 people, early March. Next week, full lockdown. Full lockdown.
But was it different in different areas as far as what was necessary or what was deemed allowed to keep moving forward? Like, where was construction in that?
So at first it was a knee-jerk reaction. So they just shut down everything. And, construction basically runs New York City. It's like the developers got de Blasio in their back pocket. It's like, our projects need to keep going. You can't rip our men off the floor. Like, construction is relatively spaced out to begin with. I mean, aside from the elevators, you got to keep it going. It's like, you can't have this shut down, and especially with just residential home building. It's like guys in Staten Island, it's like they only have like 3 people in a, 2-family house. It's like, they're just framing walls, painting, doing trim. It's like not really that big of an issue. So they use their negotiating tactics to kind of have them open up at a certain rate. It wasn't a full rate. I remember a guy telling me, he was like, yeah, no, I just went in there one day to fix the electric by myself. He goes, not even anybody. So he goes, if I got shocked, they wouldn't have found me for a month. And he was like, I just went in there to fix the electric. And there was a guy waiting outside saying, hey, you don't have anybody else in there, do you? And he was like, no, it's just me. He goes, well, if you do, it's like a $10,000 fine or something. And he goes, well, do you want to wait out here until I get out? He goes, yeah. And so that guy waited out there for 4 hours until he left and locked the gate.
Wow. Okay. What month is that? Is that like right at the early part of the shutdown? Was that?
Yeah, it was like April. Yeah, it was like April.
Okay.
So.
All right. So when did it start to loosen up a little bit? When did you guys be able to start being able to do your, commercial construction? And
I think they opened up fully like June 6th, June 4th. So I was living here in Hoboken, and I was working from home because we weren't allowed to go anywhere. And so I was just making phone calls after phone call, just seeing what the status was of everybody. It was really, some days it was quiet. Some days I'd be able to get more phone calls in than I anticipated, which was good. But then it just, it got worse and worse. And so I went down to my dad's house, and it was me, my sister, and my dad. We just stayed in the same house for 40 days and just kind of isolated ourselves. We worked from home, and just making phone calls, just, not really taking many, but people were still bidding jobs, which was good, but nobody was calling in orders or anything like that. So
yeah,
it was
when did that? So talk to me through the orders kind of freezing, and now just the timestamp this, it's May 2021. So we're, 15 months after the beginning of the lockdowns approximately, and or 14 months after the beginning of the lockdowns. So when did it start to pick up? When did people start putting in orders? Or please tell me it's happening.
I'll tell you, I can actually tell you that with actual numbers.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah, we have a sales program that tracks our sales, all throughout the and we can calculate the variance from the last year. And you'd want your variance to obviously be positive, and you'd want it to be in a pretty good range, like 30%, 40%. Like that's really good. 40% variance over the year. But you see the dip in. So my variance in March, previously it was over 60%. So that was a huge jump. Like I went down probably 30% on my book to now 60% variance as opposed to last year.
Okay. So was March of 21 your first kind of comeback month? Was that the first one you're like, all right, cool, now we're actually shipping stuff?
March of 21, April of 21, because April was our worst month last year.
Okay.
Because that was when all the lockdowns really took effect.
Yeah.
But how do I maximize it? There you go. But April was our worst month. Now April this year was my best. So it was like it was a good bounce back. It definitely was.
How's April compare? Not to get too personal, but like, how does April compare in general to like a month in 2019? Like, can you give me an idea where we are there? Is it still not back, or are you above 2019 numbers?
So I'd say, in what we were doing before, we were constantly busting through ceilings. We were having record years. We were doing really well, and I only got to sit in on those outside meetings for a short while before I got put in full time. So I was constantly seeing like, hey, we're doing great, this and that. Business is great. Let's keep going. Let's keep doing this, and then you don't really fully recover because obviously there's a lot of projects that are still on hold. Especially, I have a NYCHA project that I've been trying to work out with a customer that's been getting negotiated now. It was supposed to start in October, but because of everything that happened over the last year, it's still being negotiated because of all the pricing and, obviously lack of labor, stuff like that. So I think, the material costs are sort of offsetting it because, with higher material costs, obviously more in revenue. But I think the business is just still sort of recovering.
Okay. All right.
So,
well, hey, you're giving me a segue that I know. I'm really like, I don't know the answer to the question I'm about to ask you. Like, I kind of have an idea. I've got some, GC buddies, but I'm so glad to have you on the supply side. Jeremy, in 3 minutes or less, kind of tell us, why are we, and if you don't know, if you're listening to this, in general, building product costs have gone up one of the biggest jumps ever, right? So Can you talk us to like kind of how much they are up, which materials kind of are up, and why? What's going on, Jeremy?
Yeah, so right now we're seeing large increases across the board. And when I say across the board, that means everywhere from steel, lumber, sheetrock to insulation, plywood, and just basic GC necessities. And so originally it started with lumber because mills shut down, and also there weren't enough people to, the loggers went home, so there wasn't anybody really chopping down trees, and we had forest fires We had hurricanes. It was just if you look at 2020 as a whole, it was just catastrophe after catastrophe, and it really affected the supply chain when it came to lumber, especially because lumber is basically shipped through trains. So when those get disrupted, large backlogs fill up, and especially with the home building that followed after the pandemic. I mean, it was unexplainable. The home building exploded and the mills could not keep up with the demand. Eventually they had enough trees to kind of supplement, the raw material for the mills to supply, but the mills couldn't, they didn't have enough people working at the mill to begin with. A lot of people were collecting unemployment. So they were not able to pump out as efficiently as they could before. And now they have a huge backlog. And basically the mills set the price. The loggers aren't making money off of this because they are selling to the mills at the same price. The mills are setting the price for dimensional lumber because they cannot keep up with the extreme demand. And so, basically what that means is we're paying more to get 2x4s, which means you have to pay more. So ultimately it's hurting the consumer.
And also, I saw a 2x4. My son, we were kind of talking about it. My son's 17, and we were kind of talking about building. I was telling him how I was about to have you on the podcast, and he goes, "Well, Dad, how much is a 2x4?" Yeah. And I said, "You know what, bud? I have no idea." I said, when we did our, such and such, I've done additions here at the house and closed in rooms. I said, I don't know, like $1.78 a 2x4x8, right? And he goes, "Oh, let's look on HomeDepot.com and see how much it was." And it was like $7.97 for a 2x4. And I'm like, I was like, wait, I know I paid less than $2 a 2x4. I mean, that's a 4X. Is that just a temporary, like, are we going to go back to normal, or is this something is this the new normal?
So the good thing about, not the good thing, but, the difference between, say sheetrock, steel, insulation is that we get set price increases from the manufacturers themselves. So someone like USG, United States Gypsum, National Gypsum, Certainty Gypsum, they'll come out and say, hey, 20% increase next month. They'll give you a date, they'll give you a number. That's it. After this date, you're paying 20% more. With the lumber market, it's a free market. It's a commodity. So it's being traded on a public scale. And, when this price goes up, it fluctuates with the market. So really the numbers, you'll hear this number per board foot. It's not to be mistaken with lineal foot, which is typically measured with construction. When I get a order, it'll be in linear feet, but per board foot is measured because of, that's how they do their breakdowns with the market. And so, 2x4s right now are over $1 a linear foot, which when I started out, it was 50 cents. And that was pretty, and honestly, 50 cents, they'd be like, that's a little high. Can you go down to 42, 44? And I'll be like, all right, yeah, I can go down. It's no problem. Because there's really a lot of wiggle room. The numbers would come out every week. They wouldn't really be too far off. It would probably be a cent or two more, and we'd be able to eat the cost or offset it, or we'd be making more, who knows? But,
when did you see, hey, Jeremy, when did you see it start to bump up? Because you just kind of to backtrack, right? So we still had a really hot resi market last year. I mean, I'm in Georgia, and the Georgia market is insane. Like literally people are getting 3 bids a day. They list their house. So there's a huge demand on, it tends to be happening, a lot. So we still have resi demand. We had factories slow down. We've got factories with less labor. We have transportation issues. Is that what you're kind of saying? Like we did have some transportation issues, not to be compounded by the fact that our Colonial pipeline just got shut down last week, which is,
that's another
their headquarters are 10 minutes from my house here. So we've got all this happening. When did it kind of start to come to a head? Because like I said, we're in May now. Was this happening over Christmas, or when was this really happening?
So it's been happening since last year when COVID first, because like I said, it's a commodity. It's traded on the free market. So it reacts just like the market reacts.
Okay.
And so we actually had a purchaser. He no longer works with us, but we had a purchaser he used to trade in lumber. So he knows the market. He knows what type of things would happen. He was looking at the different, this guy was all about lumber. And so when COVID first hit, he sort of anticipated it and bought a ton of pre-cuts, which are used for framing in residential houses, and 2x4s, 2x6s at January pricing. So we had tens of thousands of pieces of lumber at a tremendous price, because as soon as COVID hit and the lockdown started, prices started to go up,
that quickly.
Up.
Wow. I had no idea it was that quick.
He sort of anticipated that. And so we were kind of able to, I won, a bunch of jobs. I built 4 houses with, 2 separate contractors just during COVID. Obviously they had to shut down for when it was shut down, but once it started back up, they were right back to building it.
Okay.
And with really little disruption, I didn't have to raise the prices mid job. And, it was really kind of stable for us for a while, but then it just did not get better. It got
all right. So Jeremy, is it happening? So obviously lumber, I kind of understand how that impacts by the mill. I mean, is it kind of just parallel when it comes to gyp and on steel also? I mean, and then is there carryover now into the finished goods of flooring?
Yeah.
And, when did that happen?
Parallel wouldn't be a good word, because they have different things affecting them. So with, right now there's a resin shortage, which you have to make, there was a resin shortage, but in order to make plywood, you take strands of, pieces of lumber and press them together with a resin to make the plywood. So during I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was during that cold front that hit Texas, and it was a widespread electrical grid just disaster. And a lot of petrochemicals come out of Texas.
This episode of the Office Marketing Podcast is brought to you by Fusion Advisory. We help commercial contractors generate leads online profitably. Check us out at fusion-advisory.com.
And so when those petrochemical plants shut down, huge, again, same thing, backlog in orders, large demand, no supply. So once they got back up and running, they probably weren't back up and running fully right away. And now they have to start feeding this demand. And again, they didn't have enough resin to make the plywood. Now CDX, which is a crap piece of plywood, not to say crap, but it's like, when you get to like birch and, different types of hardwood, plywood pieces,
right?
CDX is like, you use it to, walk on, like roofers use it to walk on. It's not really that big of a deal. It's crap plywood, but 3/4 CDX is now over $70 a sheet.
And how much was it 18 months ago?
30 something.
Wow.
Maybe.
All right.
I was selling it for 28.
All right. So all right, Jeremy, I know you're not an applied economist, but you're a pragmatist. You're a child of a bartender and a contractor. You've got a great head on your shoulders. Get out your crystal ball. When will normalcy, and I'm sure you get asked this a lot, when are we getting back to normalcy? When do you see it kind of coming back to earth?
I mean, honestly, I have this conversation all the time, and I tell everybody, I said, if I could predict that, I would not be working where I'm working. I would be making millions of dollars on Wall Street right now. So normalcy, I mean, really, it all depends on when people can catch up. There has to be some sort of break in demand where these different supply chains can sort of take a breather, because there's so much stress being put on these, petrochemical plants, lumber mills, insulation manufacturers, gypsum manufacturers, that, they were hit with really swift shutdowns. And then they were expected to sort of go back to business as usual, plus 200%, because it's like you have so many orders that are backlogged that were still going on during the pandemic, and they were shut down. And now maybe half their workforce is out, because half of them, they don't want to come back to work. They don't feel safe. They want to collect unemployment. So it's like, no one can blame them. So, it's really a matter of when these guys can sort of get a rest. And, with the building industry the way it is, if demand were to slow down, it would be a really bad knee-jerk reaction on the economy as a whole. because then they would see, home building slowing down. And they're like, okay, well, people aren't applying for as many mortgages. I'm a big advocate for Rocket Mortgage. I own a lot of it, and they got hammered simply because people stopped applying for mortgages at a record pace, during a COVID shutdown. So it was really, I mean, they're going to write textbooks on this. I mean, I really do think so. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens over the next, year or so, 3 years, what the after effects are going to be.
Yeah, it's fascinating you would say that, because as a student of life that we both are, right? We're both kind of just consummate learners, consummate observers.
Yeah.
What a fascinating time. I was born in 1971, right? A lot, many years ahead of you. I don't know if there's been a more action-packed, 15-month period in my entire life than the last 50. I mean, again, not to get political, we're talking literally about just lumber, steel, and gyp supply.
Yeah.
And how it impacts, all these different parts of the country, let alone a change in political regimes that are running our country. And it's sort of it's a really fascinating time. I almost want to have you back on in like 6 months, and let's kind of do like a recap and say like, hey, what's going on? And like, you could be my building commodity guy. Hey, Jeremy's back on to give us a quick update. Yeah. What's going on? What's going
Happy
on?
to do it. Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I mean, even from the beginning, because it was just one thing after another, not to, obviously, like you said, not to get political, but it was just like, with my job and what was going on in my business, and then turning on, CNBC or something like that, like Fox Business, and you're just seeing all these things. You're just going, when is it going to stop? Like, my head was spinning. And then, especially after the last election and everything that happened, I was just like, my kids are going to be in history class, and they're going to have history, American history, and then 2020.
Well, I know, it's crazy. It is absolutely fascinating. All right. So Jeremy, seriously, let's put it on the schedule for like November of this year. Let's come back and we'll recap. I'm going to record another one. We're going to talk about sort of commodities and what's happened, and do like a state of building materials. But let's kind of wind down and talk a little bit about you. Tell me, if you had to pick your dream infield for the Yankees anytime. Anyway, in our pre-talk, Jeremy and I talked a lot about the Yankees. So I'm going to put you on the spot. Okay. I'm going to give you, how about if we start out? I'm going to give you one starter. It's Game 7. Yes, it's against the Braves, my Braves, but it's Game 7, one starter, any starter in Yankee history. Who are you going to throw on the mound?
On the mound?
Yeah. Who's going to be pitching Game 1? Game 7. Sorry. The Game 7. Who's going to start the game?
Going to start the game?
Yeah.
Jeez, man. I don't know. I mean, honestly, just for recency bias, I got to go with my boy Garrett Cole. He's dealing, baby. That guy is dealing. He's a bad man. He is a bad man. He just shut down the Rays last night. I love it.
That's cool.
It was perfect.
Oh, well, we know. I'm not going to put you on the spot. We know who's closing, right? You already said you were there for Ramirez last.
My boy Mo's closing, but it's like, just I just love the state of the Yankees right now. I mean, even though he started off so slow, it's just like, just to have baseball back. I've been to 2 Yankee games so far. It's like, oh my gosh, just to see him pitch in person.
That's cool.
After all the hype and, all the, people barking at contracts about Mike Stanton, Giancarlo, sorry.
Yeah.
I called him Mike when I was mad at him.
Yeah.
But, people saying like, Garrett Cole's not going to be worth it, just to see him go out there and just wreck people.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, what's funny is catcher, I'm kind of going like, I wonder who you're going to pick. You got to pick one catcher in all of Yankee history. Who are you taking?
It's a good,
it's a tough one. You got Thurman Munson. You got George Posada. You've got
Yeah. I mean, definitely either Posada or, you could even go Girardi, but he's like,
you get a win-win.
He's
there.
like, maybe not like all-star status, but just, just as him as a manager as well is just, kind of in my brain. But yeah, probably Munson.
Yeah, and then we're going to
Yeah,
first, which I might go with Johnny Baseball at first, but you've got some other choices up there. Who are you putting at first?
I would go. Yeah, I would go Mr. Baseball with that one, man.
And there's a bunch of guys that are probably 70 or 80 listening to this going, how do you do it without putting, there's
that's the problem.
Exactly.
I don't get into these debates too often just because it's just like, but my friends are avid baseball fans and they are, I have Yankees fans, I got Phillies fans, and I got Red Sox fans all in one group chat. And they constantly toss out these questions, and I don't really chime in too much because I like to see their answers.
Yeah.
And it's, there's a lot of debate because there's so many people, people don't look at A-Rod's stats because of the juicing thing, but it's like, A-Rod is a legend. Guy's a legend. And, Derek Jeter is obviously just an all-time shortstop, one of the best Yankees to ever live.
Yeah.
And then you got so many people like Mickey Mantle and like that like, they're like, if he played in this this type of playground, they're not going to really do well. I'm like, dude, shut up.
Yeah, dude,
it's like,
dude,
there's sort of
yeah,
there's a lot of baseball debates are more fun to watch than be a part of.
Yeah,
I think.
I know.
Each other's throat.
That's why I only asked about the infield, because when you get to the outfield for the Yanks, it gets totally crazy. You know what? We didn't even think about Yogi Berra at catcher. Like, how do you not have Yogi Berra at catcher, right? So that'd be a fun one.
We actually, they did it. Yeah, my friends did like a top 5, and we completely forgot about Yogi, just because there's so many names. Like hold on a second. I have this shirt here.
61.
The whole 1961 and the whole 1903 team.
Wow.
With names, and I wore this to opening day. I mean, look, it's just Ford won the Cy Young with a 25-4 record. It's just MVP at all AL MVP. Maris added 142 RBIs and 132 runs to his 61 homers. I mean,
yeah, that's pretty solid.
It's insane, man. So it's like, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people you can name. You don't want to forget anybody. So
yeah, and there's also Lou Gehrig, Joe DiMaggio. They didn't suck either. They were pretty solid. Pretty solid humans too. Hey, listen, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, Jeremy, and learn more about, just sort of like lean on you as their easy button when it comes to, building supplies up there in the Northeast, how would they get in touch with you?
I would just go on my LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I repost a lot of, I follow a lot of construction communities. I follow a lot of economy communities in the whole. So you can just go look me up on LinkedIn. I think it's just Jeremy Kovacs. Mm-hmm. It's Jeremy Kovacs.
All right. Well, we'll put it in I'll put it in the show notes too, Jeremy. I'll definitely put it in the show notes. And really, you're absolutely a blast to talk to. I love your pragmatism, your approach to construction. You're just a walking reality check, man. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing. I'm serious. I want you back on in 6 months because your sharing of actually what's happening in the industry is going to be really important. And I appreciate you, Jeremy.
I appreciate it, man. No, you actually did send me one thing that I wanted to. I hope you were going to bring up, but it was the foursome.
Oh, you want to foursome? I was hitting you with the braid. I was hitting you with the baseball. Okay, Jeremy, I'm going to give you. All right, it's you and 3 guys. Who are you going with? Who are you taking?
So I actually had 2 scenarios in my head when I was thinking about it because I wrote it down. I was like, that's actually a great question because I used to answer that question all the time. But it was, I would love to be a part of just have Tiger and MJ and then me and a buddy. Just see those two kind of go at it. And then me and my friend just kind of share some beers in the golf cart. I mean, we would end up broke, but it's like, I don't care. I'll bring my whole bank account to watch that.
And by the way, if you could have Phil in there, I mean, I've heard stories about Phil and his, the way he
lefty and Tiger, or,
and he's very competitive and he loves to raise the stakes. He is an absolute rock star, infamous for it too. But MJ and Tiger, I mean, arguably 2 of the greatest athletes to ever put on their respective uniforms. I mean, obviously Michael Jordan.
Competitiveness would just be insane. And
dude, Michael Jordan, he's the greatest. I mean, he's the greatest.
You're trying to get Tiger to open up his wallet. I mean, it would be so incredible. And I also had one that I'd like to watch, which would be Lefty and Tiger and George Bush and Donald Trump. That would be hilarious. I would just watch that from a cart or have it televised or something like that.
Yeah.
Just both of them in all of those guys in their prime, just like kind of going at it. And it'd be hilarious to watch.
That would be great theater. I think you're onto something, you know, but the match between Tiger and Phil a couple years ago got great ratings. I think the match that you're talking about, George Bush 43 versus Trump 45, I think would be a fascinating battle. I think that would be it would be good. It would be good theater. I think it would be very good theater.
We can actually, you know, see if Trump does in fact give himself 5-foot gimmies.
Oh no. You know, he's definitely has his eraser out. I'm pretty sure he's got his eraser out on that one, you know? So, funny, seriously, Jeremy, thanks again. And look forward to talking to you soon. Thanks, brother.
Well, thanks, Mike.
Thanks for listening to the Office Marketing Podcast. Be sure to join the conversation on our YouTube channel, LinkedIn, and Facebook pages. If you enjoyed the episode, head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.